The world has a strange way of teaching us. It doesn't begin with wisdom. It begins with pain. Not because life enjoys watching us struggle, but because some lessons can only be understood after we've carried their weight. Almost everyone reaches a moment when they look back and whisper the same words, "If only I had known this sooner." By then, years have already passed, trust has been broken, dreams have faded, and somewhere along the journey, a piece of who we once were has been left behind. Life never sends a warning before the storm. It simply lets the rain fall and waits to see whether you become bitter or become stronger. The hardest part of growing older isn't watching time disappear. It's realizing how much of that time was spent chasing things that were never truly meant for you. Approval, attention, acceptance, love that had to be forced, respect that had to be begged for, dreams that belonged to someone else's expectations instead of your own. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they spend years climbing the wrong mountain. They wake up exhausted, only to discover they were chasing a destination they never truly wanted. That's why wisdom is priceless. It saves years that determination alone cannot. It protects your peace before life is forced to. Today, we're going to uncover 9 truths that many people only learn after paying a painful price. If even one of these truths reaches your heart before life teaches it the hard way, then this conversation was worth having. Because the greatest victories aren't won by avoiding failure. They're won by learning before failure becomes your teacher. Every painful lesson you avoid today becomes another year of your life that you get to spend becoming stronger instead of simply recovering from mistakes that could have been prevented. Truth number 1, never beg to be chosen. One of the greatest tragedies in life is watching someone slowly abandon themselves just to earn a place in someone else's world. They change who they are. They silence their opinions. They ignore disrespect. They lower their standards. They convince themselves that if they just give a little more, love a little harder, or sacrifice a little longer, one day someone will finally choose them. But real connection never begins with desperation. It begins with mutual respect. Here's the truth. Anything that has to be chased forever was never running toward you. Love isn't proven by how much pain you can tolerate. Friendship isn't measured by how much disrespect you can survive. Respect isn't earned by shrinking yourself to fit someone else's expectations. The people who truly value you don't require endless convincing. They don't make you compete for a place in their lives, and they never make you question your worth every single day. The moment you begin negotiating your value, you quietly teach the world that your value is negotiable. And that's one of the most dangerous lessons you can ever send. Your worth isn't determined by who stays. It's determined by whether you remain true to yourself even when others choose to leave. Sometimes walking away isn't losing someone else. It's finally refusing to lose yourself. That decision often becomes the beginning of a completely different life. Remember this: you can rebuild money, you can rebuild opportunities, you can even rebuild broken relationships, but rebuilding the version of yourself that you sacrificed just to earn someone else's approval takes far longer. Never beg to be chosen. Become someone whose presence speaks louder than their pursuit. When you know your own worth, you stop chasing people and start attracting those who truly belong in your journey. Truth number 2, respect is never optional. Every relationship, every friendship, every workplace, and every opportunity stands on one invisible foundation: respect. Without it, nothing lasts. People often tolerate small moments of disrespect because they're afraid of losing someone important. They laugh when they're insulted. They stay silent when they're ignored. They excuse behavior that slowly destroys their confidence because speaking up feels more frightening than staying quiet. Yet every time you accept treatment beneath your worth, you send yourself a dangerous message. Maybe this is all I deserve. Over time, that message quietly becomes part of your identity. Respect isn't something you demand through anger, it's something you demonstrate through boundaries. Healthy boundaries aren't walls built to keep people out. They're doors with locks, allowing the right people in while protecting you from those who don't value you. The right people will knock. The wrong people will complain that they can't enter whenever they want. Pay attention to those complaints because they reveal far more than words ever could. Never confuse kindness with allowing people to mistreat you. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-neglect. Compassion without self-respect eventually becomes exhaustion. Giving endlessly while receiving disrespect only empties the person trying to love everyone else. The strongest people aren't those who control everyone around them. They're the ones who refuse to surrender their dignity, even when doing so feels lonely. Peace always costs something. Sometimes the price is saying goodbye to people who never deserved access to your life in the first place. Respect yourself enough to leave the room before someone convinces you that you're worth less than you truly are. Your dignity is never too expensive to protect. Truth number 3. Don't chase those who have already chosen to leave. There comes a moment in almost everyone's life when someone walks away. Maybe it was a relationship, maybe a friendship, maybe a business partner, maybe someone you trusted for years. Your first instinct is almost always the same. Run after them. Explain yourself. Apologize for things that weren't even your fault. Promise you'll change. Promise you'll become better. Promise anything as long as they decide to stay. But here's what life eventually teaches. People who truly belong in your journey don't require you to abandon your own path just to keep them beside you. Some departures aren't failures, they're redirections. Imagine carrying a suitcase filled with stones for years. You call it love. You call it loyalty. You call it hope. Only after setting it down do you realize how heavy it truly was. Freedom often begins with releasing what was weighing you down. Some people don't leave because you're not enough. They leave because their chapter in your story has ended. Chapters are meant to end. If they didn't, the story could never move forward. Stop measuring your worth by who walks away. Instead, measure your growth by how peacefully you let them. Dignity doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't bargain. It quietly wishes people well, then continues building a life that no longer depends on being chosen. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is quietly closing the door, not with anger, not with revenge, but with gratitude. Thankful for the lesson. Thankful for the growth. Thankful that your future still has unwritten pages waiting for you. Every ending creates space for a beginning you couldn't have discovered otherwise. And sometimes the best thing that ever happens to you is the thing you once prayed would never happen. Sometimes life doesn't break you all at once. It happens quietly, one compromise at a time, one excuse at a time, one decision to ignore your instincts until one day you wake up and realize you've built your entire happiness on things you cannot control. Another person's opinion, another person's approval, another person's presence. The frightening part isn't how it happens, it's that you rarely notice until those things suddenly disappear from your life. That is why the next truth matters so much. The strongest lives are never built on temporary foundations. They are built on values that remain standing even when everything else changes. If your peace depends entirely on another person's choices, then your happiness is no longer yours. It belongs to circumstances you cannot control. Freedom begins the moment you reclaim ownership of your own emotional foundation. Truth. Number 4. Build a life that doesn't depend on others. One of the greatest forms of freedom is waking up knowing that your peace doesn't depend on someone else's decisions. Many people spend years searching for the perfect relationship, the perfect career, the perfect title, or the perfect lifestyle, believing that once they finally achieve it, everything inside them will feel complete. But life has a habit of exposing fragile foundations in the moments we least expect. Relationships change, companies close, friends move away. Money comes and goes. Health can change overnight. If your identity is built only on what you possess, you'll lose yourself every time life takes something away. Real strength is different. It isn't found in having everything you've ever wanted. It's found in becoming someone who can rebuild, adapt, and continue moving forward no matter what life places in front of you. Build your discipline, build your character, build your skills, build your purpose. These are the things no one can steal from you. When your confidence is rooted in who you are rather than what you own, life loses much of its power to shake you. Success becomes something you create instead of something you desperately try to protect. That quiet confidence becomes your greatest source of stability. Never become emotionally dependent on what was only meant to be temporary. People are gifts, not foundations. Success is a destination, not an identity. Happiness should never require permission from anyone else. The strongest foundation you'll ever stand on is the one you build within yourself. Never forget that freedom doesn't begin when you have more. It begins when you finally discover how little you truly need to feel whole. There is another trap that has destroyed friendships, families, businesses, and even great leaders. It begins with one dangerous belief that every battle must be won. Many people waste years trying to prove themselves in arguments that change nothing. They confuse being right with living wisely. But life eventually teaches a very different lesson. Not every fight deserves your energy, and not every challenge deserves your response. Truth number 5. Stop fighting the battles that don't matter. There is a silent confidence found only in people who no longer feel the need to prove themselves. When they are insulted, they don't react immediately. When they're misunderstood, they don't rush to explain. When others compete, they simply continue walking. Not because they're weak, but because they understand something most people never learn. Not every invitation deserves your attendance, and not every argument deserves your voice. Every conflict demands your attention. Every rivalry steals a piece of your focus. Every unnecessary battle asks for your time and your peace. The question is never whether you can win. The real question is whether the victory is worth the cost. Some people spend years defeating everyone around them while quietly losing themselves. Winning an argument can cost a friendship. Winning approval can cost your authenticity. There are people in this world who feed on conflict. They provoke, they compare, they criticize. Not because you've done something wrong, but because chaos gives them purpose. Don't volunteer to become part of someone else's storm. Protect your energy, protect your focus, protect your peace. The most dangerous distractions are often the ones that seem important, but leave your life unchanged once they're over. The strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest. They're the one who knows which battles are beneath them. Sometimes walking away becomes the greatest victory you'll ever achieve because silence often communicates more strength than pride ever could. Maturity isn't about proving that you can win every fight. It's about recognizing which fights aren't worth entering in the first place. Life has another painful lesson that almost everyone learns through heartbreak. Not because people are cruel, but because trust is one of the most fragile things we ever give away. It takes years to build, moments to break, and far longer to rebuild than most people imagine. That's why the next truth isn't about holding on to anger. It's about understanding the difference between healing and returning to the same pain. Truth. Number 6. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the same pain. There is a difference between healing and pretending nothing happened. Many people confuse forgiveness with giving someone unlimited access to hurt them again. They believe kindness means forgetting. They believe compassion means accepting the same betrayal over and over. But wisdom teaches something different. Forgiveness is something you give yourself. Trust is something another person must earn through consistent actions. You can release anger without reopening the same door. You can wish someone well without inviting them back into your life. Some people apologize because they regret hurting you. Others apologize because they miss having access to you. Learn the difference. Time doesn't automatically rebuild trust. Words don't automatically rebuild trust. Promises don't automatically rebuild trust. Only consistent actions repeated over time can restore what was broken. Even then, you are never obligated to return to the place where you lost your peace. Some bridges are meant to stay behind you, not because you hate the other side, but because you finally learned why you crossed the river in the first place. Never allow guilt to become the reason you ignore your own wisdom. Protecting yourself isn't revenge. It is one of the highest forms of maturity. Forgiveness frees your heart. Boundaries protect your future. You need both. Healing isn't about pretending the wound never existed. It's about becoming strong enough that it no longer controls your life. Looking back at everything we've uncovered so far, the pattern becomes clear. Never beg to be chosen. Never compromise your self-respect. Never chase those determined to leave. Build a life that no one else controls. Refuse battles that steal your peace, and understand that forgiveness does not require forgetting. These truths aren't simply lessons, they're armor. The kind of armor life can never sell you because it is forged only through experience. But if you're willing to learn from those who walked this path before you, perhaps you won't have to pay the same painful price that so many others already have. Truth 7. Discipline will take you further than motivation. Here's a truth most people don't want to hear. Motivation is temporary. It arrives when life feels exciting, but it disappears the moment things become difficult. If your dreams depend on feeling motivated every day, you'll stop the moment life tests you. That's why so many people start strong and quietly disappear before reaching the finish line. Discipline is different. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't wait for the perfect mood or the perfect moment. It simply says, do the work. On the days when motivation abandons you, discipline becomes the bridge that carries you forward. The people you admire aren't successful because they always felt inspired. They're successful because they kept moving when inspiration was nowhere to be found. Imagine two people standing at the starting line. One is full of excitement but quits after a few difficult weeks. The other struggles, doubts themselves, and even fails along the way, but they refuse to stop. Months later, the second person is the one crossing the finish line. Not because they were more talented, but because they learned to trust discipline more than emotion. Every time you choose action over excuses, you're forging something stronger than success. You're forging character. And once character is built, success becomes a natural result rather than something you desperately chase. Don't ask yourself if you feel motivated today. Ask yourself if you're willing to keep your promise to the person you want to become. Truth 8. You become what you repeatedly do. Your future isn't created by one big decision. It's created by thousands of small ones that nobody notices. Every morning you choose to wake up early. Every page you read, every workout you finish, every distraction you resist. Each one is another vote for the person you're becoming. Greatness isn't an event, it's a pattern. Most people underestimate the power of repetition because the results are invisible at first. You don't become stronger after one workout. You don't become wiser after reading one chapter. You don't build confidence after one courageous decision. But keep repeating those actions, and one day you'll wake up as someone your old self would hardly recognize. The same principle works in reverse. Every excuse repeated becomes a habit. Every delay becomes easier to repeat. Every promise you break to yourself slowly weakens your confidence. Your habits are quietly writing your future, whether you're paying attention or not. That's why every ordinary day matters more than most people realize. So don't wait for a life-changing moment. Create one through your daily choices. Let consistency become your identity. Let discipline become your language. Because when you repeat the right actions long enough, success stops being luck. It becomes the natural consequence of who you've trained yourself to be. Truth 9. Your story isn't finished. Maybe you've failed more times than you can count. Maybe you've lost opportunities, made mistakes, or watched other people move ahead while you stayed where you are. Those experiences are real, but they are not the end of your story. They're simply chapters. And no one should judge a book before reaching the final page. The strongest people aren't those who never fall. They're the ones who refuse to let failure become their identity. Every setback carries a lesson. Every disappointment teaches resilience. Every obstacle gives you another chance to discover what you're truly capable of. Sometimes life isn't preparing you to receive success. It's preparing you to handle it. One decision made today can change the direction of the next 5 years. One habit started this week can transform the person you become. You don't need to rewrite your entire life tonight. You only need the courage to take one honest step forward, then another, then another. That's how extraordinary lives are built. So wherever you are right now, don't stop. Keep learning. Keep growing. Keep believing in the person you're becoming, even if nobody else can see it yet. Because one day, they'll call you lucky, they'll call you talented, they'll call you successful, but you'll know the truth. You were forged by every difficult day you refused to surrender. Remember this, whenever life becomes heavy, the fire isn't there to destroy you, it's there to strengthen you. Steel is forged under heat and pressure, and so are remarkable people. The challenges you're facing today may become the very reason someone else finds hope tomorrow. Keep forging. Your story isn't finished.